I'd like to first of all say thank you and welcome to everybody for joining us today. So this is the last in our series of educational webinars that we've been doing to celebrate International Gaucher Day at the beginning of the month and Gaucher Awareness Month. So just in terms of some housekeeping, so on your screen you'll be able to see, oh, it's not going to move now. You'll be able, on your screen, you should be able to see a slide. Everybody, if we can ask you to be muted during your presentations. We will also have questions after each of the presenters for opportunity to ask questions. And if we can ask you to put them in the Q&A box and not the chat function, that would be great. You'll see that in this webinar that we have offered a translation, a Spanish translation. So you can see on the screen how you can switch to English, for either English or Spanish. And for those of you who have joined us who speak Spanish, this is exactly what I said in English on the screen. So I'll just give you a few seconds to have a look at that. Okay, if anybody has any problems, then just send us something in the chat function. So, as I said, welcome everybody, and today's webinar will focus on digital health technology. This is a really fast-growing area and one that I believe will play an important role in the future of medicine's development and patient-centric care. This will be through capturing patient data and also empowering patients to be more involved in their own personal health journey. Especially with the world that we find ourselves living in at the moment, everything is so uncertain. I do believe that there will be the role for digital health technology is really being explored by many different stakeholders and actually fast track, particularly in relation to being involved in clinical trials and patient care. However, we must always remember that patients and caregivers can be very anxious in terms of sharing their personal data, and that's something that we must always be aware of. So I'm delighted to say that today we have 4 speakers with us from Aparito, Backpack Health, and Centogene, and Patient Discovery. So as I said, we're going to have 4 speakers. We're going to do them in alphabetical order. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the Q&A. After each of our speakers, we'll have 5 minutes for questions, and then at the end we may have some more time if people want to ask general questions. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who also happens to be a very good colleague and friend of mine, Dan Louis, who is the Business Development Manager for Aparito. Before Dan starts, I also wanted to take this opportunity to congratulate Aparito, who are celebrating their 6th birthday this week. So Dan, can I hand that over to you?
That's great. Thank you for that, Tanya. And it's great to be here today, kind of share the story of Aparito and the work we've been doing. So as Tanya gave a kind of brief overview, I just wanted to let you all know who Aparito are and what we do. So we're a medtech company specializes in remote patient monitoring. So we use wearable devices, mobile applications to go out and get the data of patients taking part in clinical studies, because we believe that this approach can reduce the burden on those patients taking part in a clinical study and also streamline that drug development process and reduce costs, which is just as important for the companies as it is for our patients who take part in the trials, because sometimes actually taking part in a clinical trial can be expensive for a patient if they need to travel to sites. So to meet our team very brief, there's some familiar faces there. Many of you will know Ellen Davis. So Ellen is our CEO and founder who set up Aparito back in 2014 with this mission to develop a system where we can reduce that burden on patients to take part in clinical trials through remote patient monitoring. So then we have Cecile, who's our Chief Innovation and Regulatory Science Officer, who's an ex-regulator of the EMA and is able to really help everyone we work with look at their regulatory strategy in terms of clinical studies. There's myself. My background is in business development, but also in patient advocacy. So I've known Tanya for many years. My daughter was diagnosed with Tay-Sachs disease, which is another lysosomal storage disorder. So I set up a charity of my wife to provide support for families based in the UK and also within Europe and drive forward the research and actually get a couple of clinical trials started for that disease. So I understand the burden on patients and also the parents and carers for those people in trying to actually find a clinical trial for the disease, drive it forward, and then actually just caring for someone with the disease. Sadly, my daughter Emily passed away in 2017 at the age of 8, but I really firmly believe that the mission we have at Aparito will help children like her in the future. So I'm kind of excited in what we're doing with our technology solution. And then obviously many of you know Maddie. So Maddie works at Aparito and is our patient accelerator coordinator. And that's a project we launched to help patient groups develop digital endpoints that's specific to their disease. Because as many of us will know, that one of the main challenges we have in the rare disease world is one, finding an endpoint, and then finding an endpoint that's relevant to the disease, and then one that actually works. So we're working with patient groups to develop endpoints that we can then embed into clinical trials going forward. That's an exciting project. So to be here today, I thought I would structure the presentation with a few kind of questions that some of us may have and then answer as we go along. So I think the first one from today and from what was discussed earlier is kind of, what is this challenge? What's the challenge we have with clinical trials? You know, in today's climate, we've really seen that there's been a substantial increase in use of technology. And obviously COVID has expedited a lot of this because the inability to travel to clinical sites for assessment has become more and more difficult. But this has been a natural progression, and really think it's the right step that many people have taken. So this challenge kind of shows that the probability for of success for drugs entering phase 1 to FDA approval is only 14%. And actually 30% of these trials then fail to make it to phase 3. And we have to work out why. And as a medtech company, we really have looked at the why. And if we can answer the why, we're going to make a big impact on many rare diseases and other diseases when getting the clinical trials to move forward. And one of the things we identified really is that patient focus and efficiency and evidence are the main stumbling blocks that companies encounter. Low participation rates is becoming more and more common. And that can be down to not only the amount of visits that patients need to make, but the impact those visits have on patients. And I think it's important when we talk about burden on taking part in a clinical trial, it's not just the burden of going to sites to do the measurements, it's actually the impact on a family. If it's someone's a parent or carer has to quit a job, there's a financial implication on those families. So looking at that patient focus is very important so you can get the right patients involved. Then looking at how efficient the actual trial is. Many trials are set up and actually the way they collect data and the data they collect is inefficient, it's burdensome. In terms of wearable technology, for example, if someone's required to put multiple sensors on their body to measure their gait, many patients won't do it. So you look at efficiency, that can lead to patients not taking part in the trial. And then you look at the evidence and the data is actually collected. And the small sample size, you have a bigger margin of error in that if one patient drops out and the trial only involves 5 or 6 patients, if it's a gene therapy program, it have a massive impact. So you need to make sure that those trials that are set up have the right patients involved and they stick to it. And technology can be one of those answers. And the other big issue that we're seeing at the moment is what actually is seen by people. So we look at over on this side, we've got patient A and patient B. So in any traditional clinical trial, they may be testing across maybe at initiation, they're enrolled in the trial and then 6 months later. And we can see this is where they're doing relatively well, and then at 6 months there's actually a drop. But actually, in reality, this is actually the patient experience. It's not a linear, straight up or down. There are a lot of wavy lines. If the patient feels good, doesn't feel great, feels good, doesn't feel great. And no one is recording in the traditional clinical trial model here what's happening. You know, is the patient feeling better, and why are they dropping off? Why are they not feeling better in terms of the physical well-being? That's what's being measured. And what we need to do is answer this, and this is the why. Why is this not being measured? And what can we do? So we can get this, basically a view of the true global impact of a disease, because it isn't just this A to B, it is this impact. And I remember looking back with my daughter, taking her into hospital, for example, she never thrived in the hospital setting. So her condition would appear a lot worse. But when she was at home, she was relatively well, because she was in a natural environment. We really believed that actually keeping her at home and keeping everything quite natural, she thrived. So from a child who would have had a life expectancy of 3, as we were told when she was diagnosed, she lived to the age of 8. A lot of that was because we kept this natural environment for her at home without taking her in that hospital, which could have that impact on her, where we would just seen her up and down all the time. Another key thing here is the in-clinic assessments. What's actually being measured? And I mentioned before, one of the key things we're working at now is trying to develop digital endpoints specific to a rare disease. We really think that's the next step forward. Rather than trying to shoehorn an endpoint that fits a similar disease, we need to be developing endpoints that are specific to each rare disease, so patients can be measured against similar patients. There's no point in them being looked at in one lysosomal storage disorder, but a similar one. They need to be measured against each other, and that's really, really important. So this is the solution. And as I said before, we're asking some questions. We know that technology is a solution, and we know it can make a big difference, but how? You know, in terms of data collection, it can make a big difference, but also in terms of the patient experience in clinical trial is really, really important. And so for us at Aparito, and one of the reasons I really enjoy working at this company is because we put the patient in the forefront of the discussion. Everything we do has that patient focus. So when we're looking at developing our technology, we bring patients in. And that's a project actually we did with the Gaucher patients as well, is actually helping them help us develop our technology. So for us, a patient-focused engagement and compliance through the use, understanding what works and what doesn't work, can lead to this efficient system. When we have an efficient technology, you get the evidence you need. So it's high frequency data, it's real time, and you can see that global impact of a disease on an individual. There's no little snapshots along a time frame, it's all the way through. And that actually allows us to provide a solution that can give you an overview of a clinical study with our technology solution. And as I said before, this shows you how that works. Continual testing all the way through. You can see 2 patients have a different experience, and you can see that all along each patient journey. And that's very important to see the impact that disease has. Every disease is different. Every person affected by a neurodegenerative disease or lysosomal storage disorder is different. No 2 patients are the same. It's very important that when we look at developing studies, that's appreciated in the trial design, and that those who are working in that disease area understand that no patient is the same. There may be a similar course that this disease has a life expectancy of 10, but how they go along on that process will vary. And I think that needs to be picked up, and that's what this technology can allow us all to do. And just as important, we can find that higher medical need to improve that quality of life. And for us, we've always put that at the forefront, is the patient focus. And we need to see an improvement in somebody's quality of life in any study that's done. It's really important that it's not just done for science, but it's done for the community and the impact on the individual. So we can look at that disease, detect the progression of the disease, and then where the development can be done to improve that quality of life. It's very, very important. So the big question of how we do it and how we do it at Aparito is with our innovative technology solution. So for us, it's the digitized patient reporting outcome measures are really important. So understanding the patient perspective, for having them involved in the technology design and deployment to make sure it meets their needs. And what that does is it reduces the burden on the patients, and there's no need for these multi-visits to the site. A lot of these patient-reported outcomes can be done in the home setting, where you get a much better quality of data. You know, patients aren't jumping on trains or having to drive to the hospitals. They do it in the home setting. Plus, as parents who are caring for children with complex needs, you're then not having that exhausting journey of getting them ready to go to hospital, take them to hospital, take the measurements, then take them home. And that, I remember back in the day with Amylin, that would be a whole day. That'd be going for one hospital visit for 1 hour, would be a whole day experience. And we can cut that out so it doesn't impact on the daily living for the entire family. And obviously the data that's collected is given to the sponsor or the clinician in real time, but also so it can be analysed in their own setting at work. So reducing clinic times, reducing the impact on the clinicians, which is just as important, so they can see more patients who need to be seen in person, rather than those who can be measured from home, where it's in a much more natural setting. And this is our workflow. We like to be involved from the beginning. So we speak to many of our pharma company clients at the beginning of their developmental stage of their technology and their solution. So we help them devise the plan so they can move forward, rather than have us come in at the very end. So with the COVID crisis, lots of companies contacted us to say that we have a clinical trial, we can't see our patients, how can your technology help? But the fact is that their trials were never set up to have a technology solution added to them. So it was always going to be an issue, and it wasn't possible. So by involving a company like Aparito at the beginning, it means that that whole technology solution can be integrated from the very beginning. So you have a much higher chance of that technology solution being adhered to by the patient population to then give you your data and results. And this is how we operationalize it with our mobile apps and wearables and the data analytics we provide. And this is a snapshot of our tech solution. So we have a smartphone app that's available on all of the leading app stores that patients download, and they can start recording data on the PROs assigned to them on a modular basis, be it specific disease pros, endpoints, activity levels, medication, that's all in the app. Then we're able to capture videos. We do a lot more video capture for analysis. We have voice, we can capture e-questionnaires and branching, so quite complex data can be captured within the system. And we also have a wearable device integration, which means that we can capture more physiological data with Garmin or other providers specific to disease. And what's really important here is that we can integrate to any sort of wearable device, and the impact that has, it means that we can find a wearable device that suits the needs of the patient population, rather than just having one wearable device that can be added to our technology. And this is what we provide to our clinicians, which is really important. And there's no point having a trial if the data can't be accessed and analysed, and we provide this clinician portal. That means that the clinician can go and do the analysis, and that's a really important step, in that the data that's collected by patients remotely feeds into the system in real time. There's none of that burden on the patient to go to the site to give their data, or to fill in questionnaires, or to have videos done. That can all be done in that home setting. I think that's a really big step we're taking now. And COVID has obviously expedited that whole process, but actually us now having a system in place will hopefully have a big impact on clinical trials in the future. And this, just wanted to talk to you about our involvement in the Gaucher community. So as you know, that Ellen's been involved in the group for many, many years. And we've in fact did a proof of concept study. This is a feasibility of wearable technology a few years ago, which was very successful. And when we talk about bringing the patient in, this really helped us shape our technology and helped us shape our solution to make sure that our ethos of having the patient at the forefront of the discussion, utilizing technology that can actually impact people, was implemented. And this is what that did. And we actually then provided a publication that was done at the end of last year, which shows that measuring these activity and patient experience with wearable technology and mobile phone applications, which again is a big step for us to have a publication that justifies our solution and how it can be impacted into a disease community. And it goes on. There's more work we've been involved in. So there's the work here we did on the Global Patient Registry. That was done a few years ago, and so Ellen was instrumental in the development of disease-specific patient-reported outcomes and caregiver-reported outcomes, which are undergoing construct validity assessments at the moment. So as part of that registry development, so we presented that at the 2020 European Working Group. And then there's also developing digital endpoints for the Gaucher community, which was recently announced via Preval Therapeutics, and that's in their Preval trial. We're excited that our technology will then be used in another study that can have a great impact on a community we're very close to and have done a lot of work with. And we're really excited for the future as a company and the work we're doing with your community. And so it's very exciting for us. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Any questions?
Thanks, Dan. I mean, just on behalf of the Gaucher community, I want to, personally thank Aparito and their team, because as you've just demonstrated in your presentation, you've already done a lot of work in the Gaucher community, and I'm really excited about the development of our new patient-reported outcomes and observer-reported outcomes for our neuronopathic community. So we don't actually have any questions on the Q&A, but one of the things I thought I'd ask is, so things like patient-reported outcomes and the use of sort of digital health technology is quite new to patients, but also to things like, if we're looking at in the UK, sort of like the NHS. I mean, obviously we understand that COVID has fast-tracked a lot of things, but do you think that the NHS are supportive of this type of new technology, and will look to be able to invest in health technology, in healthcare technology?
Yeah, from the discussions we've had with many of the trusts, they're very keen to get some form of health technology implemented for disease groups. And I think for them, it's having that discussion with the right communities. As I mentioned before, you need to have those disease groups who would be willing to use the technology. Again, there's no point in trying to provide something that the community just won't use. And I think there are many discussions ongoing at the moment in certain disease groups where they really think that can make a big impact. And for us, that's a really exciting step. And I think the more the NHS gets involved in these sorts of projects, the much bigger impact it's going to have and more natural it's going to be. I mean, I remember with Emily, I think it was about 2013, we were talking to her doctors about, can we just do our consultations by Skype? Why are we just bringing her to hospital all the time? No, we're not allowed to do it that way. We need to see you at least 6 months. Well, to do what? Her doctors were amazing, but they were just checking her out. And these are things that we could do from home. And by the last couple of years, we did everything by the phone in the end, because it was just easier. It was easier for them and also easier for us. We weren't having to take her into, because the hospital is in London, take her into London every 3 or 6 months. And that shift was already significant then. And I think the shift now to being completely virtual is going to be huge.
And just one final question. In terms of, regulators, I think, patient-reported outcomes are, going forward are going to play such a big part in medicine's development. Regulators, they want to understand, the impact of medicines on patients, quality of life and what it actually means to them. So I think, have you had any experience in that, in terms of the work that you're doing that has contributed to sort of evidence for new drugs coming onto the market, or is it still too early?
I think we're kind of slightly too early, and we're shifting there. The regulators, the discussions we've had at Aparito, and I've also had the advocacy side, is that they're very keen on seeing new technology and seeing impact on people's quality of life as being very high. They don't now just want to have a kind of a science report that a drug or a treatment works. They want to see that bigger impact. And I think the technology solution we provide, as an example, can do that. And I think more and more companies are shifting to making sure that's included as at least a secondary endpoint in any of their trials. Even the carer quality of life question has become more and more important, because obviously the caring impact is huge.
Okay, I'm on mute, sorry. So thank you very much, Dan. Thanks very much for that. So we'll move on to our next presentation. And I'm delighted to introduce another friend and colleague, Kathleen Coolidge, and her colleague, Michael Shapiro-Barr, hope I've said that right, from Backpack. The audience is yours. You can share your slides. So thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. So I thought I would make a couple of introductory comments, and then Michael will do the actual presentation. So I was delighted to get an email from Tanya, kind of out of the blue, inviting us to give this presentation. Hello to everyone who I can't see. I think Cindy Frank, you might be on there, I don't know, but I feel very connected to the Gaucher community. For a little bit of background, I was at Genzyme, now Sanofi Genzyme, for 20 years in the position of US patient advocacy. So I know a lot has happened in the Gaucher community since I left there. But I'm really, really excited to be part of this conversation. One of the reasons I'm excited to be able to share the platform that Michael is going to talk about is that it's a global tool. So even though I'm in the US and Massachusetts, and Michael's in Wisconsin, what we're going to be sharing with you is a global tool. It's available in 6 different languages. It's intended for a global audience. So it's not a US focused tool. And we as a company, partly because of my background in Genzyme, completely understand that Gaucher is not just one disease. It's Gaucher type 1, type 2, type 3, and those are 3 very different diseases with very different health challenges. And I think when you learn more about our platform, you can understand how our platform can capture and manage essentially those 3 different diseases. It's not just Gaucher as an umbrella. When I left Genzyme, we had just started talking about Parkinson's disease, and a lot has changed since then in terms of understanding the risk factors for Gaucher patients and Parkinson's. Coincidentally, the company that now our parent company is a company called In Vitro. I don't know if you've ever heard of them or not, but they are one of the leaders in the field of Parkinson's. And when I told them that we were talking to the Gaucher community, they were very excited about that. We would love to figure out if there is interest in your part in understanding more about capturing not just risk factors for Parkinson's, potentially any symptoms of Parkinson's, et cetera. So there's a wealth of knowledge about Parkinson's that's sort of available to us in the back. If that is something that you as the Gaucher community are interested in, we would love to do that. Data privacy is very important. Michael's going to talk about that. And finally, that this is an application that is very much geared towards families. So it's geared to a patient, an individual patient, but it's a family tool. So if you are a parent managing your child's care, that is something that's possible. If you have multiple members within the family affected by Gaucher, or even if we talk about Parkinson's, that's possible. So I don't know. I think that there's a great opportunity. So I'm very excited and happy to see everyone. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Michael Shapiro-Barr.
Thanks, Kathleen. Just to introduce myself real quick, I'm Michael Shapiro-Barr, Director of Business Development at Backpack. And I've been with them since pretty much the beginning when we were a small little company before we were acquired by In Vitro. And I've always been really excited about the direction that we've continued to take the company and the product, really being patient focused. And so I'm going to go through the product itself to give a little bit of background about what our values are and what we're providing for patients and for the Gaucher community. So in talking about what Backpack Health is, first, I think it's important to note that we all feel that behind every treatment and behind every valuable piece of information that fuels innovation essentially is the patient. And that's why at Backpack Health, we put the patient first and provide a health information management tool that really truly was built from patient's own vision. And we wanted to make sure that this was very user-friendly, secure, and so that we can be a global tool, a multilingual platform. And we spent the first year before we launched the product just developing, working with rare disease populations to have them beta test and give us an idea of what they wanted this to look and feel like. So we truly do continue to want this to be patient-friendly and driven by their vision of what the product should be. As Kathleen mentioned, we were recently acquired by In Vitro. Backpack brings that patient-facing data collection tool to In Vitro's service offering serving as that conduit between industry and patients, built from established patient trust through strong partnerships and patient foundations and advocacy groups. And so that's really key to what Backpack does, is that we put patients first and foremost, and then we also find partners in patient foundations and advocacy groups so that we can work with you to really help accelerate those goals that you have to really help support that community and lead to innovative research. We are, valuable to advancing research, and very much, again, this is in the patient's hands. So users can give permission or consent to provide pseudonymized data to foundations and scientific teams to improve the health outcomes of other patients. So just a little bit of the basics about Backpack. We are an app, and more so really a platform that is available on iOS, Android, and web, fully GDPR compliant. So everything that a user or patient chooses to do is entirely opt-in. There is no default to collect information. They have to make that decision of the data points they do want to share and who they want to share it with. As Kathleen said, it's a tool for individuals, but more so it's a tool for families. So it's a way to manage the health of a loved one, manage your own health. All of that can be done within one single account so that you're not logging back and forth between different accounts, making this siloed system. It's all coming together as one single system. We're functional in English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, and Portuguese, and we do have plans to continue to add more languages so that we truly can be a global tool. And the app itself makes it really easy to store, manage, and share all the details of one's health. Again, that might be sharing it with a family member, with a specialist or provider, with a foundation, or as a part of a clinical trial or a study that's going on. So in talking a little bit more about the family health aspect, the way that it works is that you're going to essentially create an account for yourself, and you may be using Backpack to track your own health, but maybe it's more so that you're tracking the health of a child. And so you can easily add a dependent profile for that child. And then you could add another dependent profile for another child or for an elderly parent, or whoever it might be. There's no limitation in terms of the number of dependent profiles that you can add, making it really easy to manage different people's health information all within one platform and one account. We also try and cater to all different circumstances. So for example, if you have separated parents who are both wanting to take an active role in managing the health of their child, they can co-manage a dependent profile, making sure that both of them are on the same page and adding information to play an equal role in that process. In addition, if you'd like to add others from your care circle, including those caregivers that might not be family members, it's very easy to add them in as well, so that they can at least have access to that information that you need them to have, but even more so, they can help to manage that information. And in the care that they're providing, they can add that additional information to that dependent profile. One important feature for our users and for patient communities is our medical ID integration. So the way that users, once they get information into their profile, share it out with anybody that they need to is through what we call share cards. And one very important share card is the emergency information share card. And essentially this digital card is a way for you to choose what pieces of information from your profile you'd like to include on that card. So what you can do is edit this emergency information card to have essential information that you can't fit ordinarily on a medical ID bracelet or on the lock screen of your phone. And each one of these cards has its own unique URL and access code that you can see at the top of that digital card. That can be engraved on a medical ID bracelet or put on the lock screen of your phone so that first responders on their own device can access that secure web page, enter that access code, and view that additional information. So you're no longer limited again to that space. You can really get the essentials out to first responders so that they know how to treat a patient with a rare condition that they may have never come across before. The nice thing about this is that if you happen to be traveling and you're in a different country where they don't speak the same language as you do, if it's one of our 6 languages, the first responder can toggle between the different languages to quickly translate that information as that translation is already built within our system. So speaking a little bit more about share cards themselves, again, this is the way for users to securely share information with anybody that they need to. And we have two types of share cards. We have what we call personal use share cards. And so that's things like an emergency information share card, a health history share card, or I might create a share card for a specialist or for a school nurse, whatever it might be. And that is a way to, again, decide what pieces of information from my profile or my child's profile that I want to include on that card. We also have what we call group share cards. And so as we form these partnerships with patient foundations, we launch groups for each individual community that that foundation owns and runs. Tied to that group is a group share card. And it's one way that group members can, again, deciding for themselves what pieces of information from their profile they'd like to share with the foundation as a part of a patient registry, for example, or to make sure that they can get that valuable information to the foundation, knowing that they're going to use that for their research efforts to help better that community. That information that they're sharing with that group foundation is pseudonymized data. So it is not going to include things like name or their picture or any contact information. Another exciting feature that's actually going to be coming out this next month for us is symptom tracking. And right now, you can add all of your symptoms into Backpack, but we're building in an integrated symptom tracker so that you can focus in on one specific symptom that you like to track over time. The app itself will then prompt you over time to ask you, how is your level of pain today? So that after a few months, you'll be able to see over time, where was your pain level, which is important for patients to really understand the patient journey. For those that they're sharing the information with, such as a foundation, so that over time they can see how patients are doing, whether it's that they're on a specific treatment or just overall population health, so they can understand the disease a little bit better. So I wanted to talk a little bit about in vitro's experience within Parkinson's and Gaucher. So just a little bit of history, beginning back in March of 2007, the Michael J. Fox Foundation had worked with, had worked with industry and clinical researchers to identify how we can continue to promote biomarker discovery efforts, accelerate and improve biomarker studies, and establish biomarker strategies for disease-modifying Parkinson's disease trials. In vitro has supported the Michael J. Fox Foundation and their Parkinson Progression Markers Initiative since its inception, working alongside the Fox Foundation, leading on the side of imaging services and being able to support the ongoing PPMI studies. In vitro itself is internationally recognized as a leader in Parkinson's disease research, as Kathleen had noted, and we've served as leadership for that PPMI program in the Parkinson's Associated Risk Study. Focus of the studies includes identification of Gaucher carriers and their susceptibility to developing Parkinson's disease. So it's something that in vitro has a lot of experience in. And we came to in vitro having a lot of experience in rare disease. So it was a really great connection between the two. And for us, it's very exciting because they bring such scientific expertise and experience, which is really helpful for those that we're working with in the Gaucher community. So a little bit more about our patient community groups or our foundation groups. Again, we launch these groups through partnerships that we form with foundations. And this is a way for group members to easily contribute pseudonymized information to that foundation. So a lot of times, foundation will come to us because they want to launch their first patient registry. And we'll do that within Backpack. Other times they'll come to us because they have an existing patient registry, but it's not mobile friendly. And so Backpack can serve as the mobile front end to an existing patient registry, tying their existing data to the new Backpack data so that you don't have siloed pieces of data. Group members can feel confident in knowing that their information is being shared safely and securely and for a good cause. And patient community groups are helping to build robust multilingual data sets to contribute to the mission of supporting patients and families worldwide. Some of our other groups that we have within Backpack are special interest groups. One of those groups is called the Clinical Trial Finder Group. This is an opportunity for any user to join and contribute, again, pseudonymized information to Backpack about themselves and their condition. Backpack then, through partnerships with companies like Antidote and through partnerships with foundations and industry, will become aware of clinical trials that pop up within specific disease areas. We'll take a look at that eligibility criteria, look at the data that's being shared through this clinical trial finder group, and proactively reach out to those patients or members of this group that may be eligible for that trial. So they're no longer having to go to sites like clinicaltrials.gov, which is not very patient friendly, to find out if there's a trial that might be relevant for them. One of our, I think, most important features within the states, and we are in the process of expanding outside the states, is our ability to pull in medical record data. So those users within the states can actually link up to their patient portal to bring in certain aspects of their medical record, which helps them to have a more complete patient profile within Backpack. And on the research side, we're including not only that patient reported data, but we're including that clinical data that is pulled from those medical records. So this is great for rare disease populations because often we understand that patients are going to be seeing specialists across different healthcare systems. And so they're logging into multiple patient portals to really gather all that information. Again, very siloed for them and not convenient. This brings all of that together because they can link up to as many patient portals as they need to, bringing it all central to their Backpack profile. The nice thing about it too is once you establish that data connection, every few days the system will check to see if you had been to the doctor's office and there's new data waiting, you'll be presented with that data and you then have the option to add that to your Backpack profile. So in addition to the data or information that's being shared by users or group members to foundations, through that group and through that share card, foundations can also deploy surveys within their group. And so all that lives within the app. And these are what we call smart surveys, in that if you ask a patient a question and we know they already have the answer to that question within their profile, we'll pre-fill that answer for them. And then they just confirm it hasn't changed before they move on to the next question. The goal there is to avoid survey fatigue, because we know that you're often going to have to ask repetitive questions in surveys from one to the next. And some of the most important feedback we've received from the patient community is they get tired of answering the same question again and again. The other thing that we encourage our foundation partners to do is take larger surveys and break them up. Since you have the patients engaged in this app as a personal health record, you can ask 5 questions a week instead of 50 questions in one sitting, and you're much more likely to get a higher completion rate and gather that important information. So what do the foundation partners see? What we provide for our partners is access to a community dashboard. And this is where all of that data that's being contributed through that share card and through those surveys is going to be populated for you. And the nice thing about it is that we do really see this as a partnership with each foundation. And so we don't limit the amount of data that you can see that you're collecting from your group members. You'll always have access to the full data set. You'll always be able to export that out. You might want to take that and run it through third-party analytics software as an example, and we want to make sure it's easy for you to be able to do that. We also customize the dashboard so that if you want to, every time you log in, see what the population data looks like within specific data points that you're collecting, those data endpoints, we will customize that dashboard so you see exactly what you're looking for. So I wanted to spend just a few seconds of talking about how we protect patients' privacy. That is very important to us. And that is why from the outset, Backpack has embraced its compliance with GDPR and Privacy Shield. So we wanted to make sure that the system was entirely compliant with global standards for patient privacy and data privacy. So everything is opt-in and it will always be. Users are in full control of their data, opting to share the data with whomever they choose. All the information stored on Backpack is encrypted. And we also have threat detection services that monitor Backpack health systems continuously for unauthorized or malicious activity. So data security is very important to us. Privacy is very important. We built out an innovative process when you join Backpack to really break down each type of data point that you can share or add to your profile as a patient, and so that you fully understand what does it mean to share this information? Who would you be sharing this with? What would it be used for? We wanted to make sure that was very transparent and clear to patients and their families. So I want to just kind of close talking about our core values and how Backpack works. And, you know, Backpack itself, really, we want to put the patients first and foremost, as I've been saying. And we also want to make sure that we make it easier for foundations to do the great work that they're doing. And so for that reason, Backpack itself is free to patients and to their families without any limitations. As we continue to develop the product, it will always be free of charge for patients. We also don't charge foundations to partner with us. We seek our revenue from industry so that we can offset that cost from patients and foundations, really truly working with foundations as partners and having them be the decision makers of where is this data going to go. If a pharma company happens to be interested in Gaucher data, it's the foundation partner of ours that decides if it makes sense and if it's okay with the community to sell that data to that pharma company. And then what we do is we split the revenue 50-50 between Backpack and those foundation partners. So I will stop there, see if there's any questions. Otherwise, we can answer them at the end as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Kathleen and Michael. That's I've got lots of things going on around in my mind, lots of different thoughts about different things that are possible from what you're talking about. So we have one question. We actually have a couple of questions here. So we have how many Gaucher patients already use Backpack app, and in which countries is it available? That's the first question.
Good question. Yeah, so it's available in any country, because we are compliant globally. So you can use it in the 6 languages that we have, but if you happen to speak any of the 6 languages and you're in a different country, it's accessible, so it can be used. The number of Gaucher patients offhand, I don't know exactly. I can tell you that lysosomal storage disease has been a focus of ours, from the very beginning. Gaucher is something that community is starting to build for us. And so, that's why we're excited to be here today, because we want to be able to expand to provide this for more people within the Gaucher community. So our hope is that community will continue to grow.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one, regarding your Gaucher disease carrier and PD product, has this trial already started, and is it or will it be available in Europe?
So it has started. They're in the second phase of it. So PPMI 2.0 is what the Fox Foundation calls it. That I believe is launching at the end of this year or beginning of next year. In vitro itself was involved in PPMI 1.0. I can circle back to find out what the availability is for those within the EU. I do believe that it does include the EU as well, but I can get confirmation on that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we unfortunately our speaker from Centogene is having some issues at the moment, and so I'm delighted that Shelby Chamberlain from Patient Discovery has joined us and is going to present next. So welcome, Shelby, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya, and thank you for having me today. I'm Shelby Chamberlain. I'm one of the co-founders of Patient Discovery, and I'm excited to be here and share our story and really the mission that we're on to ensure that patients are better understood, supported, and treated throughout their journeys. What I would really like to do is be able to show you a video, which I'm going to do for a second and stop sharing the presentation, because I think it really gives you an understanding of, and I think we all come from a point of, we've been patients or caregivers in our lives and understand the mission that we're on, but it'll also help you understand some of the visual experience for patients. So I'm going to switch my screen One second. Here we go. So, so really what we're, I apologize. I've got to try and pull that screen back up. And now I'm having technical difficulties with getting my presentation back up, but if you'll bear with me for 1 second. Really patient discovery. Can you see my screen?
No, we can see that you're sharing, Shelby, but nothing. Okay. Yeah. Does anybody else have your presentation? Did Joe have it, or?
Joe has it, and I just need to. I have it right here. Just escape full screen, and I think I have it now. Okay. The challenges of switching between one screen to another.
Perfect.
There we go. So, as I said, and as you saw in the video, really our mission is to change the way patients are understood, supported, and treated. And you see how you see the journey and experience that my co-founder Adam and his wife Isabel had. And Tanya, I think you know Isabel, but Isabel is, through her experience, she is now the founder of the Amyloidosis Research Consortium. And so we at Patient Discovery have worked with the amyloidosis community over the last 4 years to really develop our solution. And as you saw in the video, what our solution is about is really giving voice to the things in a patient's life that are maybe outside of the clinical aspects of what's happening for them, but are really important things for what matters to the patient, what their goals of care are, what their satisfaction with treatment is, and how they can better be supported, understood, and treated. And we do that on an individual as well as an aggregate basis. And I'll explain that as we go along. So what we truly feel is that, we've all been through situations where we felt like we either didn't get enough out of an appointment, we forgot what we wanted to ask as either a patient or a caregiver. These appointments can be very anxiety ridden. Isabel will refer all the time to, while she's quote unquote cured, she has an annual checkup that she starts getting anxious about a month before she has to go in. So the times that you are with a provider can be times that are anxiety ridden, and you may not, remember everything you wanted to ask. You might get intimidated or by the medical jargon. There may be other things as a patient or caregiver that your mind, gloms onto when a provider mentions something, and then you forget the stream of thought that you wanted to pursue. Providers, on the other hand, are really frustrated by the time frame that keeps getting shortened that they have with their patients. And they often feel like they struggle to understand really what's happening holistically in a patient's life, and to be able to make, a joint decision in what is the best treatment and protocol for their patients. We likewise see that industry struggles to understand all of the challenges patient cohorts have, and how that they can better either design drug trials or have support services that can help support patients through their treatments. So what we really aim to do is to solve the patient-provider communication gap. And on an individual basis, this is really where patients are introduced to our solution by one of two trusted resources. So either through their provider, which is really primarily the way they are introduced, but also through a foundation. And as I mentioned, we've worked with the Amyloidosis Research Consortium. And then I'll also show you in our initial foray into lysosomal storage disorders, we've worked with the Fabry Support and Information Group with Jack Johnson and his group to develop a solution for Fabry patients. And so patients are introduced by one of these two resources with the understanding that they are going to go through our experience, which is really for the first onboarding experience, somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes, where they're learning about what is how to really create this appointment companion that is going to give voice to what their treatment goals are, what other things that are important in their life they really want to convey to their clinical team. And so they do this, and then they share their appointment companion with their provider ahead of time. And as you saw in the video, it's a really comprehensive piece of data for the providers to really, we call it it's like their cliff notes. For those in the US that's like the cheat sheet of what matters to the patient. And the providers will tell us they normally look at a patient's chart before going in, and they have their top priorities that they want to discuss. And most of these involve the clinical aspect of the patient's care. What we're able to provide for them is everything that's important to the patient. And so they say the 3 things that are important to the patient are almost never the 3 things that are on their list, because it involves other things. And what we've heard already today is things like what's going on in my life? What would be difficult for me in a treatment schedule? Do I have a sick child at home and I can't get to my own appointments? Do I have transportation issues? Am I the major source of income for my family? And therefore I can't take time off of work in order to be able to adhere to this treatment protocol. These are the things that really help in a joint decision-making process, and for the providers to understand how can we best design the treatment protocol for you to be most successful as a patient. So by sharing this information ahead of time with the clinical care team, they're able to come to the appointments, those moments that matter, really armed with the information and the ability to get right down to what matters and how do we set you up for the best care. And then what they're able to do is take this and tailor the support. So there are plenty of services that may be out there, whether it's provided by industry, provided by the hospitals and providers themselves, or other organizations that can help patients. So we see everything from transportation needs to copay assistance programs to really education on whether it's genetic counseling or other aspects of care that are out there to support the patients. And this is really how we believe the data-driven interventions will create better outcomes for everyone. So we started the company, as I mentioned, we've worked with the Amyloidosis Research Consortium, and the idea was to bring all the stakeholders together to really solve common problems and have better outcomes for patients. And so the way we do this is by working with foundations, patients and caregivers, healthcare providers, and industry. We've worked to develop a platform that can easily be altered and configured to meet any cohort's needs. I know, within the Gaucher community, which we have not worked yet, there are clearly different types of Gaucher. Within amyloidosis, there are 7 subtypes of amyloidosis. Our solution branches to be able to address the different needs of each one of these different cohorts of patients. And that community is also really a multidisciplinary approach to care because of all the different organs that are involved. And so we work very much hand in hand with clinicians across the board to create the solution that is going to give them the information that they need from the patients to better treat them. So we feel that by working and bringing all of these groups together, we are on an individual basis able to help patients better give better voice to what matters to them, receive better care and have better outcomes, but that by bringing the information together and allowing foundations to use this information for research purposes, that we're advancing the outcomes of the community as a whole. And then also by working with industry to help them understand those unmet needs through the the aggregated anonymized data and insights that we have. We're enabling them to learn about these unmet needs, be able to develop different protocols for drug trials, as well as different support services for the patients. One of the things that we're able to do is be able to, in line with the experience, help patients understand the support and educational solutions that are out there for them for their different concerns, whether it be about the disease itself, or whether it be about the different drugs and side effects. So, as an example of how we've worked with the Fabry community, we worked with Jack Johnson at the Fabry Support and Information Group we helped Jack actually also in redesigning his website, but also in reaching out to the key opinion leaders in the disease. And it's important, as I think everybody in healthcare understands, it's not just your doctor that is your relationship and an important relationship in understanding you. It's also about all the other clinicians that you interact with, everyone from a geneticist to a clinical pharmacist to a physician's assistant, obviously to the doctors themselves and the wide-ranging specialists that you may see. So we work to bring together this cohort of key opinion leaders to understand not only from the perspective of the patient, as Jack has brought to us, what it is that's important for that particular patient population to be able to give voice to, but also what's important for the clinicians to understand about the patients that's going to enable them to tailor the treatment to them. So we worked with the Fabry community to develop this and a disease-specific solution for them, and then was introduced by Jack and the team to their community, as well as by the providers themselves. And this is really I took some screenshots of how it is on the Fabry website to help you understand the interface with patients is really about the patients. It's about patients and their caregivers being able to collect their thoughts, be able to in a less anxiety ridden experience, be able to collect those thoughts and share them with their clinical team. We help patients learn how to get started, and it's a free tool for patients, foundations, and providers. And we do have a business model that allows us, patients do accept our privacy policy, which we take very seriously, and we have protocols in place to safeguard their data. And obviously all data is owned by the patients. Any patient who does not want to opt into our privacy policy or at any point wants to leave, as it is their data, and we have policies in place to be able to remove that. But what we do is we're able to provide insights in the form of data reports to industry to be able to help them in their trial design, as well as support services for patients. So patients are encouraged to get started, use this solution that is free to them, their providers and their foundation. And it's really about building a conversation with the care team. This is not a one-time solution for patients. This is about over time being able to build that conversation. And so as we've heard about things like survey fatigue and patients, really not feeling like there's so often that they are inputting information but not getting something back. What our solution really is about the patient having that information and the patient being able to see how all of the answers that they are providing and how it changes over time and and how their protocols are changing, because what one patient is feeling today may change dramatically in the next 3 months. And I think one of the things we've learned over this experience with COVID is things have changed dramatically, whether it is on a personal basis. We hear a lot about patients whose insurance might have changed because they might not have their job anymore. They might be stressed about the ability to afford these treatments, or about their concerns about going in to get an infusion. Is it safe to do that right now? What else, what other options might exist? And so what we've been able to do with the solution is help the providers help their patients. And so as patients are transitioning that are used to having in-person appointments and now don't have access to that, or may want to do more telehealth or remote appointments, what we're able to do is help them prepare in the same way they would for a normal appointment, be able to prepare ahead of time, share that information so that instead of in the 30 minutes they have, spend 10 minutes getting off mute and a few minutes walking to their medicine cabinet to collect their meds, be able to go through all of that ahead of time in addition to explaining what is going on in their life and what matters to them right now, so that 30 minutes is really spent on how can we best serve you right now. And so we're excited to have been able to step in and play what we see as a critical role in that continuity of care for patients during this really tough time, where they may be used to that in-person. It gives them comfort to see their providers on a regular basis in person. And now, how do we help them keep that conversation going? So as I mentioned before, we work with foundations and providers to develop our solution for a particular patient population so that we make sure that it's tailored to fit their needs, and within the community, tailored to fit the individual cohorts within it that may have different needs. And so it is designed for patients and for the providers that serve them, to make sure that we're getting the information that is needed to be able to best use it as a joint decision-making solution. In our experience in both amyloidosis and Fabry, which is our most extensive disease states at this point, what we hear from patients is this helps me organize, what I want to talk to the providers about. It reduces my anxiety and stress when I walk into the room and and what I have said is now being addressed by my provider. It to me is taking and making my relationship much deeper with that group of clinicians. And so patients are feeling empowered that they were able to not only give voice to their concerns and their priorities, but they were heard. And that because the providers are able to address these needs, they are feeling that they are more empowered and are having better outcomes in their care. There are certain things that we're able to give light to for the providers that are, maybe issues that patients don't feel comfortable, would feel intimidating bringing up to a provider in a clinical setting, just because it's uncomfortable. In some diseases we work in, there's things that include sexual dysfunction, but patients don't know to bring it up, and they feel like, they should be happy that there is a new drug that's out there, and they don't want to they don't want to rock the boat. And so what we're able to do is allow them in a much more, in an environment that allows them to do it almost seemingly private, but they are sharing with their provider something that, feels easier to give light to. So the interface of patient being able to do this at home and think through it and take the time to be thoughtful in their approach to what really does matter and what are the concerns that they have, is bringing to light lots of other issues that the providers have said that they didn't otherwise know, or it might have taken them 3 or more appointments to get to the root of that issue. So that is, that's really what we do in a nutshell, and we're thrilled to work with as many patient communities as we can support, because ultimately, if we can help patients give light to what matters to them, combined with the information that is at the provider's fingertips on their clinical profile, then we can help them really have better quality of life and better outcomes for their disease.
Great. Thank you very much, Shelby, for that. And also, I mean, Shelby, we had a discussion a number of months ago, didn't we, with the IGA and with our comorbidities project, looking at maybe how we could use the platform to support our community who not only have Gaucher's disease, but have Parkinson's disease. And I think that's something that, hopefully we'll be able to take forward. One of the questions, I have a couple of questions. I'm looking at the Q&As. So is the platform available for people outside of the US?
So the platform is available for people outside of the US. We, at this point, have been working with US providers. And really part of the way that we work and part of the relationship with foundations is about the introduction to those providers. Part of it is about developing the solution that's tailored to meet the needs of the patient group itself. And part of it is in understanding how the clinical teams internally want to take this information in. So there are things that are different one country to another. Right now, part of what we've developed is about these social determinants of health, as we're familiar with them, that are different in a single payer environment than they would be in a, in the United States, for instance. But then there are many aspects that are the same. Transportation is transportation. There's just different support that is there in different locations. And part of what we're able to do by working with the providers and working within different, with organizations within different countries, is to be able to tailor the solution to that particular group's needs. So when I say that, I mean that if you are a patient at Boston University Medical Center in Boston, the resources, and you have said that as you go through our experience, the resources you will see that are provider related resources are from that provider. They have given them to us. We are able to connect you with those because they have specific ones that can help their particular patients. But we also connect patients to FSIG as well as the Amyloidosis Research Consortium for the resource that exists there. But as we work with different providers, we're able to upload the resources that they have. I mean, everything from where should I stay if I'm coming to visit, coming to visit your institution, to intake forms that they particularly want patients to go through. So it's important for us to work with the foundations to be introduced to the providers and be able to provide that support. It is a process, and we're constantly adding new institutions to our solution, but patients can certainly go through it outside of the US. It's really, we have not expanded our provider network at this point in time to be a global one.
Another question, and I think I'd like to ask Michael and Kathleen this as well, is that obviously with your platform, Shelby, obviously the provider or the clinician plays a big role. And how have you found that? Because we're all very aware that time is a big issue for many of these clinicians, but also things like firewalls and access to information. So how easy is it to get clinicians to sign up, you know, to be part of this, as well as the sort of interoperability between systems?
So we're agnostic to whichever you know, health system, so or medical record system. So we're able to integrate into any system. And you absolutely kind of nailed it on the head, which is it's really difficult with providers. You know, they struggle to have time, and one of their big frustrations is spending too much time inputting information into a system. And so part of what we've done, and we've spent the better part of the last 2.5 years working with them to understand how can we seamlessly integrate this into your clinic. And we know each clinic is slightly different, which is why, as I mentioned, if you're going to Boston University Medical Center, the resources and the information you're getting are specific to them, versus if you're at University of San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco, you're getting different resources. So we have worked to develop this so that we can tailor the solution and the support to help them. So things like intake forms are very specific to them, and it enables them to not have to key in those patient-reported outcomes and other intake forms, and really is patient-centric in the sense that I think we can all, how many times have we filled out the same form? How many times have we answered the same questions? And what we're really aiming to do is remove that burden from the patient and from the provider. So how can we pre-populate answers you have already given? How can we facilitate this so that, for instance, with Dawn Laney in Fabry, Dawn says the best, we do the SF36 on our solution, and patients don't have to do it, but 80% of them opt to do it on our solution. And she said, the best thing about this is I don't spend less time with the patient, but now I can dive into the answers they've given. And instead of them coming in feeling survey fatigue while they're in our office and going through this, they're able to do it ahead of time, and we can dive into the specific issues, and we're able to show to the patient and the provider how that may have changed since their last appointment. So here it's, as she says, it's not necessarily what they said right there. It's how did it change since the last time? And how do I want to dive into that to investigate further? That's the way we feel like we're peeling back the layers of the onion to enable them to get to the core of what's the, you know, what is the issue and how do we best support the patient?
Okay, thanks. Michael and Kathleen, do you have anything to sort of add in terms of, you obviously talked a lot about, you know, the patient side, the family side, in terms of, you know, sharing data or information with clinicians, and how acceptable are they of receiving that, and, you know, are systems set up so that, you know, that interoperability is actually available?
Yeah, good question. So, you know, we take a slightly different approach in that it's more about being able to help the patient gather the information from themselves, from a medical record, through a patient portal, and streamline that process too. You know, at least within the States, when you want to request a copy of your medical record, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through, and it can take a long time. Through this process, it takes 20 or 30 minutes, and you're going to get that data back. So it's really about helping the patients to gather that information, and then they're making that decision to proactively share that with a provider. So we don't link up with the specific provider systems. We want it to really be owned by the patient so that they're adding that information. And then again, it's going to be their decision if they want to share that with the provider or not. We have found, especially within rare disease populations, there's much more willingness of providers to take the time to view that information and contribute. You know, more broadly, that is a challenge. You know, they're not going to take the time to learn a new system or integrate with a new system. So most of the work that we do with providers and key opinion leaders is that they're taking the information that we can provide about the app so they can help recruit patients to start using this tool, which in turn helps them because they have more information to review.
Great, thank you. So we've got a question from one of one of our participants, Patricia Luki from Guatemala. Patricia, I'm going to allow you, I'm going to give you the opportunity to actually ask your question directly. So hopefully, oh no, that's the wrong one. Oh dear, where's she gone? This is why
I guess I do have the permission.
Oh, you're there now. Great.
Yeah. Yes, I have two questions, in fact. And the first question is about connectivity. You know, I work with this kind of application. In fact, we developed the first application was not for a telephone. Oh yes, we have a WDAM in 2002. And no medical doctor nor patient wanted to use it then because, you know, connectivity problems. Still, we have connectivity problems here in our region. And it happens to be that patients especially feel frustrated because they cannot access the application. That's my first question. And usability is something that I also want to address, because this is also a part of the problems in order to enroll patients and providers. The other problem I see here, at least, I don't know if you have faced this abroad, is that medical doctors hate anything that has to do with computers, of programming, filling out forms. In fact, I'm now returning from my doctor, and he fills out everything by hand, and then he handles that to his assistant in order to fill out the forms in the computer. So how do you think we can overcome that problem?
I'm happy to jump in. So, you know, I think that connectivity is definitely an issue. And we've seen that. And, you know, we wanted to provide an app that can function without that connectivity. So, you know, Backpack, you can enter information without having internet connectivity. Things that you can't do are, if you wanted to pull in the States the information from your medical record, you'd have to have connectivity to do that. But we did want to give people access without Wi-Fi or internet connectivity to add that information and have it stored locally on your phone, so that in the case of an emergency, if you're somewhere in a remote area, you can still access the information. In terms of, you know, doctors and providers and their practice, you know, we understand we're not going to change the way that they practice medicine. And a lot of times the information that they're collecting or, you know, they're writing this down, it's on paper, which is difficult to then get into a Backpack profile or to share with somebody. So, you know, one of the options for patients when we're talking about them sharing information with a doctor or provider, and that doctor or provider not be willing to, you know, log on to a new app or even go to a web page to view this information, we do have that option for them to just simply create a PDF of their digital share card, print it off, and have it with them. So they can, you know, essentially speak that language, give them that piece of paper so that it's easier for them to digest that information and then utilize it.
And just to add, thank you, Michael, that I totally agree. There is no extra paperwork for physicians or healthcare providers for them to complete with what we have created. So, thanks.
Okay.
I think with Aparito as well, our solution, it's all about just reducing time. So it's all about educating the physician as much as the patient, that using new technology can actually have a big impact on their own time. So they're not even needing to reproduce things. I remember the days with written down on paper and it goes off to someone, and then you get the notes and then the letter sent out to the patient maybe 6 weeks later. I mean, it's ridiculous how that happens. It should be instantaneous. And the idea of this new technology is that you can have instantaneous results, instantaneous information shared. So there is no delay if urgent treatment's required as well. That's also one of the frustrations, that people can be sitting around for a letter from the doctor to say you need an operation or your condition is worse. And when reality is they should just have that information straight away. That's kind of what we're trying to provide as well, as a solution, that you monitor someone's health in a study from home. you get that data straight away, so you can highlight if they need to be seen urgently by the doctor, and it just improves the quality of time the doctor spends with the patient. Again, it's not form filling, it's actually engaging with the patient. I remember reading somewhere like in the UK, the GPs maybe spend, I think it's like 15 minutes per appointment they spend with the patient, and the 10 minutes of that would be just going through paperwork, and they have 5 quality minutes asking the questions. That needs to stop. You need to have a quality appointment with the doctor so you can actually assess your health.
Following on Dan's point, and connectivity is definitely an issue, and we see that from patients everywhere. But we do have the ability to have patients be able to print off a PDF and bring it in if it's something that they are not, that they're not able to connect into their doctor's office, or it's not a doctor that we've been working with to have their information. Patients absolutely have the ability to do that. And one of the things that we really understand is patients are seen by so many different doctors. It would be impossible for us to have everybody on our platform, especially when in some diseases you're seen by a specialist at one location one time a year and then treated at home locally, and could be by a variety of different providers. So we give patients the ability to email patients not in our providers not in our network, or to print it off as a PDF and bring it in with them. Obviously, it's much more beneficial for both the patient and provider if it's known ahead of time, because it's much more efficient and they're able to triage on the back end in their clinic, which person in the clinic should be speaking to the patient about which issue. Your doctor doesn't speak to you necessarily about your affordability issues. That would be, maybe a social worker or a case manager, depending on the clinic. So it's certainly better if it's done ahead of time. And as Dan was just saying, to be able to have that time when they're together be efficient and focused on the patient and not focused on inputting, which is why we certainly believe that being able to integrate into these systems to take that inefficiency out of the process is important.
Okay. So we've got 2 minutes until the end of our session. So we don't have any more questions. So I would like to say a massive thank you to our great speakers today. I hope everybody will agree that I think that was a really excellent webinar. And hopefully it really demonstrated how, particularly the Gaucher disease and the rare disease communities can really benefit now and going forward in the future from digital health technology. So all of our presenters today, all of them their companies have websites, and I'm sure we can share the contact details for those websites as well if any of our participants would be interested in having further discussions with any of you on projects or any questions. So finally, just before I close, 2 things. One is, after today's webinar, everybody who participated will get a link to a short questionnaire. So please, it will just take you less than a minute to fill it out, and that would be really great feedback for us. And also, this webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded onto the IGA's social media platforms, as have all of the other webinars that we've been doing throughout October, and we've had a lot of views from those as well. So again, thank you so much to all of you, and I look forward to talking to you all again individually, and on behalf of the Gaucher community, thank you for your work. So thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.